probably only enhance your property value, right? This is kind of attraction to visit. So I just, again, I just kind of find it interesting. So, moving on to the powerhouse. This is the last project that we'll look at.
Very different. Looks very different from that first, just the one-dimensional shot you had. Yeah.
Yeah. So that Mitch Cope and Gina Reichert have probably, and please correct me if I'm wrong, have probably garnered the most national and international attention of late. That heaps of articles that are either about them, dedicated to them, or referencing them in the New York Times, and a lot of the foreign press are kind of obsessed with them as well. Both of them are trained, with advanced degrees in art and architecture. I think Gina is the architect and Mitch is more of the fine artist. So these are people that already, before they decided to begin this project of transformation on, again, this is a property that they own in the eastern part of Detroit on Moran Street. That before they began this initiative, already were kind of situated within particular high art contexts, if that makes any sense. So they actually purchased this house in 2005. And then what they've done that I find quite interesting is that they continue to transform the space over time. So instead of just kind of putting up a wash of color and that's pretty much it, that their investment is in this kind of ongoing engagement with the community, that they will live here and that they will transform this house and other houses around it. And as we'll hear, they kind of created this little chain effect. So they as a couple are working, and then another couple came in, and then a third couple came in, and all of this was elevated in an article in March of 2009, the article about the $100 house, which you may have read about. So all things were kind of aligned at that time. So the article, the $100 house article, is written by Toby Barlow, who's a short story writer. And so in early 2009, at the time that this article came out, Cope and Reichert are kind of identified as the designated authors of a particular strand of art and architecture-based revitalization. So it's not to say that other people hadn't done this kind of work before. Clearly that had happened, but in a kind of an ahistorical sensibility, all of a sudden it was as if no one really had done this before. So Barlow's article, which was circulated widely about the $100 house, which explains the kind of Cope and Reichert project, which is kind of called Design 99. They're often, instead of just referred to as two individual people, they're just called Design 99. That they are kind of the authors of a particular constellation of activities that are unlike anything seen before, bringing together various strands of revitalization, some fine art based, some kind of more community art based, but they've kind of elevated in status through this attention. So as Barlow explains, one house, which was purchased by the couple in 2005, which is what you're looking at there, led to the purchase of 2 adjacent lots, and then to the house next door, which was resold to another team of artists, and then the addition of a third team who bought the now mythical $100 house. And so we have another quote from Barlow, from Brian?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Brian had that quote.
Yeah. The city offers a much greater attraction for artists than $100 houses. Detroit right now is just this vast, enormous canvas where anything imaginable can be accomplished. From Tyree Guyton's Heidelberg project, think of a neighborhood covered in shoes and stuffed animals and you're close. To Matthew Barney's Ancient Evenings project, think Egyptian gods reincarnated as Ford Mustangs and you're kind of close. Local and international artists are already leveraging Detroit's complex textures and landscapes to their own surreal ends.
So it's quite a provocative statement. On the one hand, he's kind of situating them in this pantheon of greatness. So Matthew Barney, who had been at the time was in the middle of making those films, which kind of have come to fruition in the last couple of years, and then also Tyree Guyton himself. So kind of situating them among these official, accepted fine arts people who are working in various community practices, but then kind of pushing beyond to say such things as, and this is kind of a later quote from Barlow, "In a way, a strange new American dream can be found here amid the crumbling, semi-majestic ruins of a half-century's industrial decline." So all of a sudden, it's that kind of myth of the phoenix and returning to Cope and Reichert at this moment in 2009 as kind of messiahs of sorts. That they're doing something that no one else has done with art, which that's a little bit controversial. And as we'll see in the kind of the subsequent article, less than a year later, some of the totalizing optimism of Detroit as just this vast, enormous canvas where anything imaginable can be accomplished is necessarily called into question. And the value of the Design 99 team's effort is redefined by another New York Times author, Rob Walker, in an article called "Consumed Art as Security System." So this is a little bit of a detail, kind of a smaller version of their house. In 2010, if any of you went to the MoCAD, about this time last year, Reichert and Cope had two projects. They had a project, they were installed in the DIA. Did anyone happen to see them? And they had kind of ephemera from their various projects, and they were actually in a project room as soon as you walked into the DIA kind of side door entrance. So they were installed in the DIA, and then subsequently were at the MoCAD and were showcasing some of their they have a oh gosh, what's that animal called? I can't think of it.
Unicorn?
Yes, unicorn. It's like one of those mini bulldozers, bobcats. Bobcat. They had kind of decorated a bobcat and made it into this functional object that could help them with their powerhouse projects, but was also this aesthetic object, and so much so that it could live inside, comfortably inside the MoCAD. So they also had a whole series of pieces called, let me get this right, Razzle Dazzle Security Sculptures. These are sculptures that they had created, again, with kind of use of wild color as strategic mechanisms to keep predators at bay, literally trying to get people out and away from their houses. So on the one hand, there's the spaces that they create are designed to invite community members to participate in various ways, but then their razzle-dazzle security sculptures are using the same aesthetic to keep the wrong people away. So that, I think that's kind of another interesting tension. Okay, so Rob Walker, in his New York Times article, writes, he presupposes that his readers are familiar with the Barlow's perspective that we talked about earlier, that kind of glorifying perspective. Walker writes, at this point, about a year later, the idea that artists can treat the city like a canvas ends up suggesting that it is a lost cause, and an entire metropolitan area written off as raw material for upcycling. The net effect is a part of America depicted as if it exists in some distant reality, somebody else's problem, nothing to do with us. So kind of in a refreshing sense, he's kind of taking them down off of their pedestal a little bit, saying that they're still doing interesting work, but that they're not doing everything, that they're not the kind of one answer to fixing the city. And in this way, whether he knows it or not, he's kind of invoking Jerry Heron's explanation of how Detroit operates in the national imagination as a kind of borderama. Jerry Heron has this theory of Detroit as borderama. And Holly number 2 has another quote that's from Jerry Heron.
The city's discouraging facts are methodically applied to construct a border that will separate Detroit from everything else in the country, as a means of separating things we want to believe from things we want to believe aren't relevant because they apply to somebody else.
So this is a kind of an interesting confluence. I'm not sure if the New York Times article is just responding to the aesthetics of the Cope and Reichert Design 99 project, or if perhaps he's been reading Heron. One way or the other, it was just kind of an interesting overlap for me. And Walker's article goes on, this is the New York Times author, goes on to encourage a kind of anti-ruins porn perspective. Perhaps you guys have heard about ruins porn, the extent to which we glamorize and commodify the ruinscapes of our city.